the word psychedelic means mind manifesting. And certainly you get that experience with high dose ketamine. Ketamine's a fascinating molecule because at different doses, and I'm sure we'll get into this, the effects can be quite different.
I am curious hearing that. How is it, if we know that a substance that works on one set of physical systems is able to have an effect that is so similar to those that work on completely different systems? How is that even possible?
There is that debate. Is it a psychedelic? Is it not a psychedelic? Therapeutically speaking, it can lead to tremendous breakthroughs. What we know of both classical psychedelics and ketamine is that it reduces activity in this default mode network, which is in many ways synonymous with a sense of self.
The Webdelics podcast is back, and we have Sharon Niv with us today. Sharon, we're going to be talking about whether ketamine is even a psychedelic. I'm quite curious to know the answer to that, being that this is Webdelics. Start talking to us about that question.
Absolutely. First, thank you, Scott. It is such a pleasure to be on Webdelics. I'm really excited for this conversation. We had such a good preliminary one.
But thank you, Sharon. It was a blast.
It is. So it is interesting. One of the things we talked about is there is a big debate. Is ketamine even a psychedelic or not? And the reason that this debate exists is that the classic psychedelics that we think of, LSD, psilocybin, which is magic mushrooms, or ayahuasca, they all work on the serotonin system in the brain, probably a neurotransmitter that your audience, our audience, has heard before. It's one related to mood, to sleep, to digestion, even all sorts of things. And the classic psychedelics do work on a serotonin receptor called the 5-HT2A. Don't have to memorize that, of course. And they create the kind of classical psychedelic experiences that people have seen in the films about the 60s. And ketamine doesn't work on the serotonin system so much. It works on the glutamate system. So the glutamate system is a very, very prevalent neurotransmitter system in the brain. In fact, it is the most prevalent excitatory neurotransmitter. So almost every time there is a firing happening in your brain, glutamate is involved. And that means the effects are extremely widespread, and we will get into that. But because it works on different systems, certain neuroscientists or certain researchers just don't think it's appropriate to put them in the same category. That said, when people take high enough doses of ketamine, the effects really are pretty similar, in my humble view, to what you might consider classic psychedelic experience. There can be a lot of visuals, certainly, a lot of, the hallucinatory experience that people have grown to consider synonymous with psychedelic experience. It's a very exotic state of mind, state of consciousness. So the word psychedelic means mind manifesting. And certainly you get that experience with high dose ketamine. Your mind can reveal to you various images that kind of lie at the core of your unconscious, and you can begin really exploring that in these higher dose states. Ketamine's a fascinating molecule because at different doses, and I'm sure we'll get into this, the effects can be quite different. That said, it doesn't belong to the classic psychedelic category. It sits in a category of medicine called dissociative anesthetic. And so there is that debate. Is it a psychedelic? Is it not a psychedelic? Therapeutically speaking, it can lead to tremendous breakthroughs. And we also know that much like classical psychedelics, it shifts the balance of your brain's activity from the top down, that is sort of experiencing the world through what the brain already knows, to the bottom up, that is becoming more in tune with the micro sensations, with what's coming in through the senses, and some of the activity that's happening underneath the surface that usually your brain kind of shuts down on in order to make sense of the world. But ketamine, much like psilocybin or LSD, can release some of those scaffolds, and it's a much more chaotic state in a way, but it does also allow you to then create new interpretations, to create new beliefs. And that's how it works therapeutically. I'm sure we'll get more into that. So it shares many properties, but it just works on a different neurotransmitter system.
I am curious hearing that. How is it, if we know that a substance that works on one set of physical systems is able to have an effect that is so similar to those that work on completely different systems? How is that even possible?
Right. I think the reason that they do such similar things, and yet there are differences in terms of the phenomenology and how it feels. Certainly, have a high dose ketamine experience, a high dose LXD experience, they're going to feel quite different. But what they're both doing is, as I said before, reducing the balance of the top down. So we have a couple of really prominent brain networks that are kind of constantly working. One of the most well-known ones is the default mode network, which is what we're in whenever we're not busy with an external task. It is anti-correlated, means one is on, one is off, and vice versa, with what's known as the task positive network, which is exactly that. When you're doing a task, when you have a goal, solving a problem, figuring out your way to work, that's one network. But when you're not doing that, when you're just kind of going inward and daydreaming, thinking about yourself, maybe absentmindedly reviewing things that happened to you. Did I do that right? Did I not do that right? Maybe kind of unconsciously reviewing your to-do list, not in a very focused way, but in a background way. You're in default mode network. And what we know of both classical psychedelics and ketamine is that it reduces activity in this default mode network, which is in many ways synonymous with a sense of self. So it loosens that enough that different activity can kind of take hold and be reprocessed, reoriented by the brain, and maybe land in a different default state after. So that's what I think both of them are doing, is allowing that balance to shift from the more rigid, stringent ways that we usually view our default life to allow for things to open up and get rebubbly and perhaps reform in new ways.
I like that rebubbly image, by the way. Thank you for bringing that. It's pretty vivid. You said that a classic psychedelic experience at a high dose, LSD was the example you used, versus a high dose ketamine experience may have these properties in common, but they are different in some fundamental ways. Okay, you can't say that and have me not ask how and why. So go for it, Sharon.
One of my best friends is a psychonaut, and he said something that I thought was really interesting. He said that when he started tripping he was actually quite late to it, I think late 20s, early 30s, all things considered. Many people are doing it in high school. But he found that high dose LSD or psilocybin was not what he expected from the cartoons about psychedelic experience when he was younger. He said that ketamine was actually closer to that when it came to the state that's known as like the K-hole. The K-hole is an interesting and kind of exotic, mysterious state that some people really fear. But in a sense, many people who love higher dose ketamine and find it very therapeutic really aim toward the K-hole. It's a very visual constructed state that has its own visual properties, whereas with psilocybin, you may get very melty, wavy. The trees are speaking to you all of a sudden, faces are melting. That's not really the case, visually speaking, with ketamine. You get much more constructed views. People talk about like crystal palaces that they view, maybe looking through the machinery of the universe, really seeing things shift in these very constructed and geometric ways that are really can be quite beautiful. You can see the contents of your inner being kind of being expressed in the environment around you in a way that can be really enlightening, really exciting. I remember having a very high dose ketamine experience early in my life. I must have been in my early 30s prior to getting married. And what I saw manifest was like a world of yes to my marriage, yes to my husband. And I remember that really vividly. And that's not something that I so much find happens with higher dose classical psychedelics, where it really does feel like a much more symbolic set of imagery experiences that can arise. Also, with tremendous power and tremendous meaning, it's not apples to oranges, just kind of a bit of a different experience. What happens with ketamine, though, because it's in that dissociative anesthetic class of medications, you get this interesting effect somatically. So, whereas people talk about the body load of classical psychedelics, it can be kind of uncomfortable for some people. Some people it's great. For some people, it can be very uncomfortable, a little bit nauseating. Because ketamine is in that dissociative class, there's a real spaciousness that happens. People can talk about really feeling in higher doses removed from their bodies, dissociated from their bodies. In the lower doses that I'd love to talk to, because that's where I've built my domain. The experience is a partial dissociation, and it's like feeling bigger than your body, feeling like you're a big room instead of a small body that's really identified with and synonymous with its sensations. Suddenly you get a little bit bigger and you're able to experience your body with a bit of psychological distance. So it might be interesting if you're down to talk about the different levels of ketamine dosing and how they actually manifest.
Very much so. Although, again, I have to comment about the vividness of your explanation around the concept of expansion. When I tell people that I host this podcast, and we talk about some of the themes that have come up over and over again with regards to any sort of psychedelic or for the purposes of that conversation, even a ketamine experience, this idea of feeling expanded or that you're being expanded comes up. And people don't always understand what that means. For the first time, you've really put a concrete visual behind it that I have heard on this show. And so thanks for that alone. But so far, we have been talking about these higher doses. And in earlier episodes, we've discussed microdosing, particularly of psilocybin, magic mushrooms. The idea of microdosing ketamine hasn't come up at all, to my knowledge. Talk to me a little bit about what is a microdose. I know that's not the exact term, you'll get to it. And then what are some of these medium doses and how do they impact everything?
Very excited to tell the Webdelics community about microdosing ketamine. So let's start at the top. It's a dissociative anesthetic. So with high enough doses, you're ready for surgery. It is such a safe drug, by the way, that it's routinely used in child operations, battlefield anesthetic as well, because it doesn't depress the respiratory system. One of the things that makes it a very, very safe medication. But then you're out. Consciousness is just out at that point. Take it a little bit lower and you get to that K-hole state that we described. That can be a complete ego death in a sense, but there's still some consciousness that's there. And ego deaths can be extremely therapeutic. They're actually, in a sense, in Buddhist literature, there's the idea of the cessation moment, the moment where your sense of self kind of comes in and out, either for a long time or even just momentarily. Back, there is always a bit of a more organized, cohesive, calm way of being that's a little bit loosened from a lot of the narrative BS that kind of runs our day-to-day experience on a regular basis. So the K-hole state we talked about, it can be really beautiful. Not here to poo-poo the K-hole state at all. Take it down a little bit lower, and you might get into, and again, psychedelic is in debate, but let's say that we're going to call ketamine not a classical psychedelic, but a non-classical psychedelic, an alternative psychedelic. At a lower dose than the K-hole, you're in that psychedelic state. And this is the state that people have started talking about, for the most part, for ketamine-associated psychotherapy, where the client comes into the therapist's office, takes a dose either through intramuscular or sometimes sublingual, higher doses than what I'm working with. And there are still visuals. There is still a sense of exotic consciousness. I had someone describe feeling as though they were melting into the sands of time. And
wow.
yeah, and they described it as a relief. It wasn't a complete ego death, but it was enough of an introduction to how it might feel to just let go of human life and melt into the sands of time. They described communing with the spirit of their beloved grandmother who passed not too long before. These are really beautiful exotic states as well. But with any psychedelic, I'm sure the Webdelics audience is familiar at least with the idea, there can be what's known as a epistemically transformative experience. It's the dropping of the veils sufficiently enough to see life from a very different perspective, that it can be overwhelming. Even with something like ketamine, where there's that spaciousness and the distance between sense of self and experience, you might still come see things that you didn't want to see. You weren't prepared for that. That's not what the intention was. And it still can be a bit too much for certain systems, certain times of life. Maybe there are times of life that are a little bit too much turbulence to be met with something so dramatically different. Wakes up epistemology, that your belief in the world, your understanding and knowledge of how things work, shakes it up enough that it's just too uncomfortable and you still need to piece things back together afterwards. And if you weren't prepared for that, if that wasn't the intention, it can be challenging. It can be very challenging. Certainly, I'm sure you've heard the phrase, there's no such thing as a bad trip. Anything hopefully can be integrated with the right intention or the right care or the right support. That doesn't mean it always gets integrated. Yeah. And so this is where the work that I do comes in, because we're going to take it down from anesthetic level, get me in the screen, anesthetic level, K-hole, psychedelic. Now we get to this psycholytic or microdosing. At first, we weren't calling it microdosing because there's an understanding that microdosing is subperceptual. It's a small enough dose that you don't even feel anything. You might just realize later, gosh, I was more creative today. The world seemed brighter. And this is not that, because it is still perceptible. People still have an experience phenomenologically and in terms of consciousness, but it's much gentler. We call it go low, go slow. It is like, with ketamine, it is like as I said, just a bigger room. Instead of being in your body and the sensations of your nervous system are completely fused with your sense of self, whoosh, you've expanded, you're a balloon, things are still happening inside, but there's a space for you to view them, engage with them, with your intentionality, with a blanket of safety, with a space of ease. And what we've found over the last 3 years of working with now 85,000 patients is that these doses really work. They work for reducing anxiety, reducing depression, for helping people come to a better place around sources of trauma. And that in therapy, therapists report to us regularly that their clients have been able to make contact with a material that's typically too overwhelming to process directly. And so it's just a beautiful opportunity. And it doesn't carry that epistemically transformative potential of dropping your veils all at once, leaving you, feeling a little bit naked against some truths that maybe you weren't ready for.
And that may be, in a way, the answer to the next question I have, which is there, if psycholytic doses are the most effective ones, really any need to go into these higher level doses? Why would, if there's all this risk and I could have a terrible experience and like you just said, be naked facing myself in the universe. Like, why would anyone ever do that as opposed to just having a nice, easy? Why would you jump off a cliff when you can just walk down a step?
Okay, Scott, beautiful question. Well,
seriously.
It's a great question. And I guess I'll work against my own interests here and just say, if people feel called to a more to a deeper, more intense experience and they feel ready for it, of course it can be beautiful. Of course it can be transformative in a positive direction. If people feel resourced, they have the support system, they have some mental health skills, they've been in therapy for a while, they know how to work through difficult material should it arise. It can be very transformative. It can be very beautiful. And I mean, I told you the K-hole state, I think is a tremendous state done safely with someone there with you. Don't do it responsibly. Of course, I am not here advocating for irresponsible medicine use. But there are benefits. I have to share a personal story that I've had a lifelong phobia, and I did one ketamine session intramuscular with the godfather of ketamine therapy, whose name is Dr. Phil Wolfson. He wrote the MAPS book, the ketamine papers. And one session with him, and I would say my phobia dropped from an 8 to a 5.
Come on.
And maybe I would have gotten there over time with the psycholytic as well. I think I probably have made a huge difference. And now it's like a tool in my arsenal that if I know that I might be met with my phobia and I'm still feeling a little nervous, I can take a little bit and feel a little bit safer from the panic that might ensue. But nonetheless, there are benefits to these higher dose states. But there are some drawbacks too. We already talked about the potential overwhelm. It's expensive.
Wow.
That's real.
Hey.
Yeah.
Don't relate.
That's real. If you want to go to a therapist who's trained in high dose ketamine therapy, it can, you're taking 3 to 4 hours of their time. So you're paying $250 per hour for them. You might need to get if they're not a licensed psychiatrist, medical doctor, you might need to go with a psychiatrist first to get the medication. If you choose to do it through, there are other online telehealth companies doing higher dose stuff. It's in the thousands of dollars there as well. If you go in for IV ketamine treatments, the least expensive I think I've heard of was $1,100 a session. But if you find something a little cheaper, don't quote me on that. But it's not going to be considerably cheaper. These are expensive treatments. So yeah, and they're not as accessible. You do have to go somewhere generally to do it, except for the telehealth services that will send it to your home. When we began this program, Joyous, by the way, I don't think I've said that yet, Scott. Joyous is the program.
Great name, I have to say.
For the Webdelics audience. If the reason we went with these lower doses as opposed to the higher dose stuff. First of all, the higher dose stuff already existed. We have a couple of, I don't want to say competitors because I think we're doing different things, but there are a couple of great telehealth services doing the higher dose stuff. It is a much higher cost. And as I mentioned, if you are psychedelically naive, if you haven't worked with these doses, you shouldn't do this on your own. And so what some of these companies do is they send a brief training, I don't even know how long, to someone that you designate my sitter. So it could be your family member, your friend, who's just supposed to be around in case of emergency. If you do have a bad reaction, you are lying on your back and you vomit and asphyxiate, none of that. We don't want that, right? That said, we didn't feel like it was responsible to send large doses home to people who may be psychedelically naive. One, what if they decide to skirt that issue? They're like, yeah, we did the training. It's all good, but I'm going to take it on my own. Two, many people are not super connected. And so it could be that they live with their partner, who's the person who's triggering them, who's now their sitter. It seems a little complex to us. I'm not here to, of course, denigrate any other companies. I think that many people are doing great work, but that's not what we decided to do.
Yeah, and look, I just have to say, we're keeping it real here at Webdelics. If we're not talking about these risks, then we're not providing the public with the service that they deserve.
I think so. Thanks, Scott. That's a very good reinforcing point. But yeah, so we decided that this microdose approach was going to appeal to, I don't know about more, but a different group of people at least. People who, one, may not be ready for the really dramatic, epistemically transformative, I really do love that phrase, experiences that a higher, more psychedelic dose may bring. Two, who can't necessarily afford that. So Joyous is $129 a month, which, as far as I know, is the most affordable ketamine treatment out there. And three, the convenience of it is really very noticeable. You get prescribed online via telehealth appointment. I mean, we can talk about everything that's involved. We do an intake to make sure that it's a good fit and no medical contraindications, no psychiatric contraindications. And then you meet with a provider, same thing. You got it sent to your home. And these doses are so small that you don't need a sitter.
Oh.
We start them so low. We start them at 15 milligrams, and it's buccal, just like between gum and cheek up there, like tobacco sniff.
Oh.
15 milligrams, 25%-ish bioavailability. So that's nothing. That's less than 4 milligrams of ketamine actually entering into your system. Most people barely feel that first dose. If they feel a little something, it's like a little lightheadedness, very rarely like a little bit of nausea. We can work with that through our system. We give feedback on how to prevent any side effects that may arise. But starting at 15 milligrams means you're getting used to this medicine with like a little taste. That one really could be, no one would dispute that is microdose. That's really little. Slowly raising until we feel and they feel that they've reached the right dose and the symptoms have started to resolve. At that point, people are really used to the way that it feels. They no longer feel any sort of like hesitation about the spaciousness, the openness that comes, any anxiety that people felt the first. Many people have never taken a psychoactive medication before. No experience with marijuana, no experience with whatever the kids are doing in college these days. And so it might take a little bit of getting used to. They might feel some anxiety in the first few times they take it of just like, oh, what have I done? What if I don't like it? What if I get stuck here? All the thoughts that I'm sure the Webdelics audience has, considered before. But within a few weeks, that's gone. People look forward to the hour or so of real spaciousness, of a nervous system relaxation that they receive when they take this medicine. And they make really good use of it.
Are there allergies that people might have to it, or any sort of medical risk factors? You mentioned that you do an online intake form that addresses some of those, but before someone even contemplates this, are there some things that they need to consider that are at a minimum yellow, perhaps even red flags?
Sure. We'll take care of that. So we don't want you to worry about it at all. But you come in, you initially take like a little Quizlet that's just, get started. Am I a good fit? Something like that on the website. And it looks at some basics. Are you over 18? We're still not prescribing to minors at this point. Are you pregnant? Do you have a history of either psychosis or mania? Not hypomania. We will work with people who have bipolar 2 disorder. With bipolar 1, there is actually some evidence that ketamine is useful for bipolar 1 disorder, but we believe that it's a high enough acuity condition that it benefits the patient to work with a psychiatrist locally in a little bit higher touch than telehealth can provide. So we won't work with mania. At this point in time, we won't work with certain personality disorders. I believe borderline personality disorder, we also think is a high enough acuity. Even though with my new therapist program, we are considering allowing it if the therapist, signs on that they believe it's a good idea. What other active substance abuse or substance dependence? We're going to say let's resolve that, and maybe this is not a good idea, at least over telehealth. So those are the psychiatric contraindications. Medically speaking, uncontrolled high blood pressure. Like if you're on medication and you still have high blood pressure, let's not. Aneurysm, cerebral hemorrhaging, seizure disorder, not a good idea. If you have certain liver or kidney conditions, we may ask for a collaboration letter with your PCP or specialist. I think those are the major contraindications. There are no contraindicated medications, except that we don't currently work with people who are on Suboxone, Subutex, buprenorphine, methadone, mostly because we think that it's best to It's not that the medication itself is a contraindication. It's just best to resolve any opioid disorder, um, and not get on ketamine, at least over telehealth at this point. If you're on stimulants, ADHD medication, we will still treat you. We recommend taking the medicines 4 hours apart, and that's because they can both transiently raise blood pressure. So those are basically the things, but we will catch it. We have an intake form. We have the quiz that lets you know right away not a good fit. If you've passed that, you take the intake. That's like a 15-20 minute written form. We may catch a few more things, like we do a little screener for psychosis or mania. Maybe you don't know that you have it. Seems unlikely, but maybe you don't know, and here if you
Yeah.
and then the final check is by the provider, just making sure no relevant history that we missed. So we will catch it. We haven't had issues on this front.
That's very comforting to hear, Sharon. Um, then what happens next? So I get a package in the mail and instructions, and walk me through all that.
Yeah. So first, we want Webdelics. If you guys want to come in and just do an intake with our providers, that's for free. You don't even have to pay until you speak to a provider, get your questions answered, check out what the treatment would be like, and then only then, if you're approved for treatment, you make the decision: do I want to continue and pay for this subscription? So provided that you decide to do that, you do get the medication shipped to your home, usually within 3-5 business days, and we start texting you on a daily basis. Good morning, your dose for today is 15 milligrams. Please place it between gum and cheek. Set an intention, be with yourself, journal a little afterwards, and come back tomorrow. We have a check-in for you. And then we start sending them these daily check-ins that look at symptoms, at mood, at side effects, at sleep, and start adjusting on that basis. We very slowly raise people, provided that they're not experiencing any side effects, and provided that maybe that's already resolved their symptoms and they don't need to go any higher. But generally we end up raising people a little bit until we find the right dose. So those come in daily. After 6 weeks, the patients have the opportunity to say, I feel better, I'm ready to go down to a weekly check-in. Great, no problem. They're also invited to participate in our online portal, where we put out courses that are designed to help you make sense of mental health, and go through guided exercises and meditations that we think are best suited to the ketamine state. And there are also live events on there that we just started doing. There's a community of people who just post in support of one another. It really is a very sweet community. It's kind of like a Facebook, but just for people who want to work on their mental health with ketamine. And yeah, generally people stay with us for about 5 to 8 months. Some people stay considerably longer. We just say some people need insulin daily. Some people may need more mental health support for their anxiety or depression longer than 5 to 8 months. And we love when people graduate. We love when they come and tell us, I feel so much better, I'm done. We're like, great.
And that actually leads to my final question, Sharon. Share some stories.
Yeah. Gosh. I recently was speaking to a patient who started taking our medication when his father was ill. And he and his father had a long history, as many of us do with our parents, that was not always very positive.
Mm-hmm.
And he was really preparing for, what does it look like when my father starts to pass?
Mm-hmm.
And so he was very intentional with his medication. He would take it, he would meditate and be with himself, usually set an intention. One thing I like to help them through, I have a couple of meditations on this, is dropping all the way into the body, being there for a while. But when you're there, when you're with your true nature, when you're really feeling, I'm at my depth, I'm making real contact with the essence of who I am, drop a question in. Don't expect an answer right away. Just know that it'll come from your inner wisdom over time as it needs to appear. And so he was doing all that and journaling afterwards, as he was spending more and more time with his father, who became more and more ill. And as time went by, he really came to a place of not only being able to see his father from this much more integrated place, not like necessarily dismissing the things that had happened, but forgiving, understanding the totality of who his father was, the trauma that shaped the man, coming to a place of understanding without devaluing what had happened, and being able to both reparent himself, feeling the capacity to love his, it sounds so cliche, but love his little inner child the way that he
Yeah.
always needs to be loved. To hold him through this process of the fear of losing his father, plus the anger that he still had, and also just come to be a guide for his father. And he really credited the Joyous program for developing this capacity to be a healing, forgiving, redeeming presence to his father, who finally passed away about 2.5 months ago. And he said, just, my God, I never imagined that I would be able, to be this presence, to be this redeeming, healing, forgiving presence. It healed both me and I believe my ancestors going backwards. And just to be able to find himself in this place after, I think he was about 4 or 5 months into the program, when his father became ill. And I think he was about 8 or 9 months in when his father finally passed. And just that journey, getting to hear it directly from him was so moving. He's still in the program now. So.
The information that guests like you, Sharon, provide on this show makes it worth listening to every single time. And I've got to say, over the period of time that I have been hosting the Webdelics podcast, I feel like I'm getting a masterclass practically every week. But as valuable as the information is, the stories are the things that linger with me forever and that really have changed my mind about what these are, what they mean, what they can do for people, from way back when I first started hosting and knew nothing about psychedelics, whether classic or not, and was just here to learn. I've learned from these stories. I've learned from that one. And for that, I am very grateful, Sharon. If there is one thing outside of that story that I'm going to take away with me, it is understanding that the dosing of ketamine doesn't have to always be the same. And what that difference is really can make a massive impact as to the risk and the harm and how the public really should be perceiving that substance. Matthew Perry is just one example that comes to mind. Other certain very well-known figures whose names shall not be uttered are others who, when you hear about them, you think about them being on ketamine and acting in ways that are extraordinarily bizarre, or in the case of Perry, tragic. But it's hard to believe, and I don't know the specific dosing information about any of these people, that based on what you're saying, they've been operating at this sort of psycholytic level, and understanding that may be something different than people imagined is out there, but that can still help them, is a very, very important thing to take away. If there's one thing that you would like to share that you haven't had a chance to so far, or something that you would like to underscore that you said already, please let us know what that might be.
Scott can have two.
You certainly can.
Awesome. One, I do want to mention about Matthew Perry. If you go and read the New York Times report about the toxicology, he was found with anesthesia levels of ketamine in his blood. Unbelievable. I mean, the medical malpractice there is staggering and harrowing. And it sounds like several people have lost their license. And also he drowned. He didn't, it's important to note, ketamine is very safe. It's used in surgery. He wouldn't have died had he, been outside of a hot tub and on his side, providing, asphyxiation. But just the dosage difference between what Matthew Perry was on and what a patient of Joyous can expect is in the 50, if not 100 difference. It's a huge dose that he was on. That's one, and it is heartbreaking. It's tragic, as you said. Well, and then what would I love to leave the audience with? I think I haven't said this yet so directly. The prospect of working with psycholytic doses is low risk, high reward. It's inexpensive, as we said. The possibility of a psychiatric or medical emergency is negligible. Vast majority of patients don't even have a side effect. The ones who do, most resolve very, very favorably. And if you don't like it, you can stop. It is a 1 month by 1 month program. And the potential for transformation is huge. Over for anxiety, a little under for like 48% for depression, remission. After being with us for 2 months, about 50% of patients are just no longer depressed or anxious. The other ones generally achieve mild levels. So if you started severe, you go down to mild. And that's a huge quality of life difference. And so the opportunity, if this is a good match for you, is huge. And the cost is significantly lower. It's just worth considering.
As my mom used to say, Sharon, where can we find out more about you? And what do you have going on?
Awesome. So right now you can go to joyous.team to learn more about the program. If you happen to be a therapist or be in therapy and want your therapist to learn more about us, there's joyous.team/therapy, which is our free therapist collaboration program. So your therapist can get trained in how to work with you with these doses, and it's free to them. And there are continuing education units that they get for free at this point for a couple of months at least. So that's where you go to find out more about Joyous. If you want to find out more about me, I have a Substack at sharonniv.substack.com. And I haven't written in a little while, but I keep planning to whip it back out as soon as possible.
I cannot wait to get on there and see what you have to say, because I've already gotten a lot out of what you've already shared just in the past hour. Sharon, thank you again for being a part of the Webdelics podcast.
Scott, thank you so much for having me. It's so much fun to talk with you.
It has been a blast. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to subscribe if you are listening on your favorite audio channel such as Spotify or Apple. Also, make sure that you leave a 5-star review on such a channel if that is where you are taking in this whole Webdelics podcast experience. If you're watching it on YouTube, you can also press subscribe, press the thumbs up button, as well as make sure that you hit the bell so you get notified every time we have a new episode come out. And if you're on YouTube, please leave a comment, a question. We want to hear what you have to say. We want to connect with you. We want to be part of your community, and we want you to be part of our community. Once you've done all of that, go to all of our social sites and subscribe there. Hey, you're going to see some video clips with Sharon on there very soon, if not already. And then after all of that's been finished, hey, you gotta go to the Webdelics website, webdelics.com, webdelics.com. Sign up to our newsletter. We have a whole host of other curated, credible, and incredibly informative content that comes on that platform as well. Wow, you will have done a lot by then, but I'm still gonna ask for more, and that is that you make sure to come back next time for another episode of the Webdelics podcast.